Welcome to the walkthrough of frequently made mistakes for assignment 4 in CS 8395 in summer 2022. First, as always, please make sure to document your code and make sure to run the regression tests. We'll probably catch lots of problems we're going to look at below. Let's take a look at some of the problems I saw with the client solution. So first, in crawl page async, this code is not properly checking to ensure that the depth limit of the web crawling has been reached, so make sure you do that. And then secondly, there's a helper method here called getPageInformation that's really just a one-liner, so I recommend using the one-liner implementation rather than calling a separate method. We'll talk about this a little bit later on below. Here's another problem with crawl page. Please combine the two filter calls into a single filter call using a conjunctive expression. And then please always try to use a method reference here instead of a lambda expression. Now let's turn our attention to images on page async. This code is too complicated. It's unclear why this is different from the solution you provided for assignment 3 for the same method, which was correct. So please go back and make sure you understand why that code was correct and use it again here. Here we have another example of a problem with images on page async. First of all, there's no need to use subscribe on here. That's what the async method is doing. And then please also use a method reference here. It'll be more concise. Similar problem down here. Please don't use the subscribe on call if that's what's being done by transform image async. And again, you can replace this call with a method reference. Now let's take a look at the download image async method. So please get in the habit of using a method reference instead of a lambda expression, which will make the code a little bit more concise. There are ways to get the compiler to automatically make that transformation for you without you having to do extra work, other than push a button. Down here, let's take a look at transform image locally. The return from create new cache image should be stored or passed along as part of the flux chain and used in the of nullable call. It's not being used here properly. Here's that method from before. We don't need to define a one-line method called getPageInformation, especially one that doesn't have any comments explaining why it's there. Just go ahead and use the mwebpagecrawler getPage method reference, and that should do the trick. Now let's take a look at the transform image remotely method. If you're going to use the flat map iterable operator, which is a good thing to do if you change the tests, please go ahead and replace the ti arrow ti with just the call to function identity, which is a little bit more clear what's going on. Now let's start moving our attention to the server side. This is the applied transform method, or transforms method in the main controller file. Please make sure you add the request body annotation here. Likewise, down here, make sure you use request body, not request param. And then here, make sure you use both request body and request param. Don't leave those annotations off altogether, otherwise strange things will happen and your code probably won't run. Someone left a comment saying they had no idea how to implement the apply transforms method. Please go ahead and take a look at the video walkthroughs that we did for the flights reactive microservices example in a live session many weeks ago, and that shows how to do that type of code. Let's turn our attention to some more issues with apply transforms. A lot of people had some challenges with this. This code here is just way too complicated. It was stretched out over all kinds of lines. It's really just sort of a one or two liner. Don't have to be this complicated. So please, again, take a look at the video walkthrough of flights reactive microservices to see how to do this more concisely. And same thing down here. This is just code that's way too complicated. Let's take a look at apply transforms, another problem. This code, once again, is very complicated. I don't know what is going on here, but it's unnecessary. There's no need to call this get instances method. There's no need to call this filter. There's no need to call this map. So I don't know what's going on there, but it's way too complicated. You just need to basically be able to get the transforms, lowercase them, and then check to see whether or not they're contained in the transform that we're trying to work on. Down here, we see the flat map call. You don't need to call .accept here. You do need to pass the map in the body of the post request. You also need to call retrieve, and then you need to call body to mono. You don't need to do exchange to mono. I suppose it's doable, but I think it's a little bit more extra work. And you also don't need to call subscribe on here. That's handled automatically by using the retrieve call and taking advantage of the web crawler class. Moving on to get more problems with apply transforms. There's no need to create a stream of transforms and then use the from stream. factory method on Flux, just use Flux from iterable on the transforms list. That'll be a little bit more concise. Yet some more problems. These two calls to map are way, way, way too complicated. Please simplify them significantly by using transforms to lowercase. I guess I should say transform to lowercase because you want to iterate through every one of the transforms, and use filter. I don't even know what this is doing, but it's not what you need to do. It's way too complicated. And then this code here is also too complicated. You don't need to be using stream.map. Instead, you should be using the flat map operator on the Flux stream. And when you do that, you will find you no longer need to call block first. We'll talk about this in a minute, but you really never want to be calling blocking operators, or very, very rarely want to be calling blocking operators in Project Reactor or any reactive streams environment. Kind of defeats the whole purpose of doing it. And you also don't want to be calling collect here. Yet some more problems with apply transforms. Please make sure you use filter here to only allow the microservice that performs a given image transform, and also make sure to use the to lowercase method on said transform to make sure it's in a canonical format. Down here, yet some more problems with apply transforms. This can be simplified to not require a stream. There's a much simpler way to do this. And again, please never, never, never call .block or .block first or .block last if you can possibly avoid it. There's no need to do it here. Just replace the call to map with a call to flat map, and that should obviate the need to call block altogether. Yet some more problems with apply transforms. This code had some good stuff in it, but then there was never actually a call to the post method to actually send a post request over to the microservice. So you have to think through the logic. And I recommend, again, taking a look at the Flights Reactive Microservices example video walkthrough from weeks earlier in the course. Now we get finally to move on to some other methods. This is called get transform service. It was a helper method, but it was making things too complicated. You should never, again, use block or .block first in Project Reactor code if you can possibly avoid it. In this case, it's trivial to avoid it. But instead, revise your solution, if you want to do it this way, to return a flux rather than returning a list. So you want a flux of string, not a list of string. Here's another overly complicated implementation of get transform microservices. This code here is, again, too complicated. Just return the result of calling discovery client.getServices, and then use the to lowercase method as mentioned earlier in order to put the transform into a canonical format. So you can avoid having to deal with mixed case. So that is essentially the walkthrough of the mistakes that I saw, or the things that could be improved in assignment 4. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know.